Well, Thomas Edison is best known as the man who invented the light bulb. Perhaps less well known is why. Thomas was born in the US in the late 1800s and by all accounts was a workaholic, staying at his desk late into the night, even into the early hours of the morning. Indeed, on the night that his first wife died, he had to be called home from his desk at 2 a.m. just so that he could be there when she took her final breath. However, he was pretty quickly back at work again. Edison loved his work, but there was an obstacle. There was something that stood in the way every day which stopped him from working. And that was the night. As one writer says, for Edison there were never enough hours in the day for work, so he made more. Behind the invention of the light bulb, there was a man who was determined to never stop working. So on the night of October 22, 1879, he got a bulb to burn for over 12 hours. Within days, he had one which burned for 100 hours. As a biographer writes, it would not be long before eating by candlelight became something special. Edison would move heaven, earth and New York City to create a commercial network for electric light. Now the whole world could stay up late. Edison had murdered sleep. He was part of a gang of assassins who've been at work since light divided night from day. Creating more hours of light, dividing night from day. Edison had a problem that all of us suffer from. He wanted to be God and be in control. For Edison, what that meant for him was that he was constantly at work. And indeed his work was shaped around how he might be able to do more of it by creating light, such that it impacted upon his sleep as he stayed up late looking for ways to escape the night and keep working, to be in control of even night and day. Being in control, it's an attribute that our workplaces put a premium on, isn't it? Planning for every potential outcome, mitigating against any surprises. And it can be an attribute that we might put a premium on as well. Knowing what's going on, orchestrating circumstances so things work out how we hope that they might. We get the desired outcome. And yet when you come to the Bible, you get a very different story, where the quest for control, far from being something which is commendable, is described as a vain pursuit that can lead to anxiety. Now what I want to do for a few moments now this morning is look at those first couple of verses from Psalm 127. See what they teach us about God's sovereign control, our propensity to ignore and forget that, and the impact that can have on our sleep. So it's a psalm which speaks about work, our daily work. Build, labour, toil, they're the words that get used in those couple of verses. It's about constructing, fashioning, achieving, accomplishing something that we all know of in our daily work. But it's also about watching, safeguarding, protecting what we've done. Two experiences common to us both, building and watching. But alongside all this good building, this good safeguarding, there is another word that appears in these couple of verses. 3 times, in fact, in just 2 verses. And that's the word vain. See, verse 1, build in vain. Again in verse 1, watch in vain. And then in verse 2, rising early, staying up late in vain. What makes all this building, watching, toiling vain? If the Lord is not in it, the psalm says. So Psalm 127 it's not anti-building, it's not anti-work, it's not anti-accomplishing, it's not anti-watching, protecting, safeguarding, it's not anti any of those things. What it is warning of is undertaking all of that activity apart from God. Apart from His intervention, His involvement, it's vain, the psalm says. And the word vain, it has the idea of transience. that our efforts they're fleeting and they're short-lived. They're like mist and vapour passing quickly away if we're labouring in our own strength, if we're thinking that somehow the outcome is determined ultimately by me, not seeking God's wisdom in how something should be attempted, not resting in Him providing the final outcome. So the psalm, it acts as a warning, it acts as a reminder to us who live in a world where we often think that we're the ones who are in control, that the outcome rests in my hands, in your hands. The psalm says, thinking like that, it is foolish. And it means that the work that we do is vain. But you notice what the psalmist does differently the third time the word vain is used? In the first couple of occasions, he looks out at others who are building and watching and says, if God's not in that, it's in vain. But look what he does the third time. He becomes intensely personal. He turns to you and to your labour and he says, in vain, you. So let me ask, is it you? It can certainly be me. I am someone who likes to pride themselves on being organised, disciplined, structured, good things which can enable good work to be done. But there can be a dangerous flip side to all of those good things, and that is liking to be in control. Just very recently I was painfully reminded of this aspect of myself. As something I had sought to orchestrate, it fell completely apart right before me. I had been labouring to a certain end, all the pieces were coming together just how I'd wanted them to. So confident I was of the outcome, I had boasted to more than one person about what was going to happen. Until it all fell apart. There was a brief afternoon phone call and everything I had planned came undone. How did I respond? I was so angry and annoyed. This is exactly what I didn't want to happen. This is exactly the outcome I hadn't been working towards. It was a response, that initial annoyance and anger, that it really exposed my heart. How controlled I had become by the quest for control. The great irony that the thing I wanted the most, control, that was controlling me and my heart. But there was another response. That night I lay awake stewing about it, and thinking about all that had gone wrong, and thinking about ways that I might perhaps be able to regain control of the situation. Which is precisely what this psalm warns will happen. That will be the outcome if we labour in our own strength and think that the outcome ultimately rests in our hands. Verse 2. In vain you rise early and stay up late, eating the bread of anxious toil. You see, when control drives you, that only leads to anxious toil, the psalm says. Because the responsibility rests ultimately on you. The outcome rests on you. And that is a very heavy burden for any of us to try and carry. A burden which can lead to concern, to worry, to anxiety, all these things. As we rise early, as we stay up late, working, striving, labouring to try and keep on top of everything, keep everything under control, or waking in the middle of the night with worry, concern, anxiety that things are either out of control or how can I possibly keep it under control? The pressures of work for many catch up with us and they impact upon our sleep. And it is something that is affecting our country in huge numbers. 2 weeks ago, The Age published an article titled "Sleep Anxiety, the Zeitgeist in a Restless World." And it reported that 1 in 3 Australians have a problem with sleep. 1 in 3. 1 in 5 say they get less than 6 hours every night. A restless, anxious, awake population. Up late trying to keep on top of things, rising early trying to get a head start on a massive day ahead of them, or waking in the night with concern and anxiety and worry of how can I possibly handle this burden. If it's not you, then there's a very good chance it's one of your colleagues. The verse 2, the Lord grants sleep to those he loves. Sleep. Restful sleep, the psalm offers. How does a restless, busy, anxious population like ours get this? It is as simple and as difficult as humbling ourselves before a good, sovereign God who is ultimately in control of all things. The one who ultimately determines the outcome of our building, of our watching. Acknowledging that self-sufficiency it's an illusion, that it is a fiction to think that somehow we are in control. That when Jesus says in John 15, without me, apart from me, you can do nothing, he means nothing. That every act we take is dependent on him. Every outcome is determined and directed by him. Every breath we take is given to you by him. The psalm wants us to stop and remember this, which is precisely why God has made us to need to sleep. If you talk to any doctor, scientist, sleep expert, they will all tell you the same thing about sleep. We have been wired to sleep. It's inbuilt into us to need to sleep. Why? Well, the neurophysiologist will tell you that sleep is when neurochemicals get replenished. The psychiatrist will tell you it's when our memory is consolidated. The physician will tell you it has a metabolic function, all of which is probably true. But what reason does God give for why we've been wired to sleep? Why has God given us sleep? Sleep is a daily reminder that you and I are creatures and we can't do everything. That we're not ultimately in control. We do need to sleep, but the one who in Psalm 121 neither sleeps nor slumbers, God, he doesn't need to sleep because he is the only one who is ultimately in control of all things. I mean, if you ever stopped and wondered, why has God made humanity to need to sleep and be completely inefficient for 1/3 of the time? I mean, you make humanity in your image to rule the world under you, to do all sorts of good building and labouring and toiling, and yet for 1/3 of the time they're going to be completely ineffective. I mean, what on earth was God thinking? He was thinking this: sleep will be a daily reminder to my creatures that I am God and they are not. That they're not in control. But rather I, a good sovereign God, I'm the one who's ultimately in control. And so I don't need to sleep or slumber, but they do. I am the one who will clothe them like I clothe the flowers of the field. I am the one who will feed them like I feed the birds of the air. And you know what? The fact that we have this built into every single day, I think suggests that God knew we'd be prone to forget. And that we need a reminder at least once a day that he is God and we are not. And the American preacher and writer John Piper puts it like this. He says, once a day God sends us to bed like patients with a sickness. The sickness is a chronic tendency to think we're in control and that our work is indispensable. To cure us of this disease, God turns us into helpless sacks of sand once a day. How humiliating to the self-made corporate executive that he has to give up all control and become as limp as a suckling infant every day. Sleep is a daily parable that God is God and we are mere humans. Friends, in a restless, anxious, busy, awake world like ours, this is good news. This is great news. That the burden of responsibility doesn't need to rest on you. So what would it mean if we embraced this truth and it overwhelmed how we lived and how we worked? Let me make 3 suggestions. Firstly, I think it should mean that we resist the urge to be a control freak in the office. That we will be people who are marked by not by a frantic restlessness, but a calm dependence. We'll be able to let things go, to give tasks to other people to do, even if they don't quite do it how I would have done it. We won't be micromanagers, explaining every single little detail when most likely the people that we hand tasks over to are capable and competent and able to do it. So are you free to do that? Are you free to relinquish control of responsibilities in the office to others? And when you do, are you free to leave them to do it? Or are you constantly checking in on them? I'm not suggesting for a moment that we abdicate our responsibilities, but it is very hard to tell a world about a good, sovereign God who is in control of all things when we're a control freak in the office. Secondly, I think it should mean that we soak all of our labour, all of our building, all of our daily activity in prayer. The reformer Martin Luther said, "I have so much to do that I shall spend the first 3 hours in prayer." Now, I'm not suggesting you need 3 hours every morning, but I love what that quote captures. That being busy means more time praying, not less. I think prayer is the hallmark, and so it is also a barometer of how deeply we depend upon God. Thirdly, I think it means we should plan and allow time to get sleep. That we do what we can as well as we can in the hours that He gives us. We work and we work hard and we work well. But at the end of the day, we stop and we allow time for the sleep that God has made us to need. In his book Zeal Without Burnout, Christopher Ash, he reflects on Psalm 127 verse 2, and he says this: God may or may not give us sleep. That is His sovereign choice. But if we don't allow time for sleep, He can't possibly give us the slumber we so need. So allow time for sleep. The fact we've been wired to need sleep has a number of practical implications. It means that, like children, we function well if we have an evening wind-down routine. Having a cut-off point to coffee and caffeine intake, which is probably earlier in the day than you'd like it to be. Limiting alcohol consumption, which might be good at getting you to sleep, but it's terrible at helping you sleep well. Instead, a wind-down routine that might involve prayer or reflecting back on a verse that you began the day with. And reading fiction, especially fiction, can be great, very helpful. And turning off screens as well. We can't unpack it here, but the kind of light that your tablet and your phone uses actually triggers a hormone in your body that tells you it's time to wake up, not time to go to sleep. And so respect the way that God has made you, to need to sleep, wired to sleep, and allow time for it. Well, let me close with this. I was recently talking with Bill, who is an older Christian businessman who is retired now, and he told me the time when he was part of a massive retrenchment of staff. In the months leading up to his retrenchment, his staff at 50 had been halved to 25, and so he knew his was inevitably coming. Monday morning, he went into work, only to receive the news he was one of 70 who were laid off that day. If there is ever a workplace situation where you're reminded that you are ultimately not in control, it's when you're made redundant. And if up until that point you have been operating as though you're in control, then that is the kind of thing that happens in the workplace that can crush you. Now, Bill can't remember if it was later that day or it was the next day, but he was talking with another colleague who had also been part of that round of 70 who'd been retrenched. And to this day, he still doesn't know what he had said or what he did, but they were talking, and as the conversation came to a close, the colleague looked at him and said, You're handling this really differently to the rest of us. It's because you're a Christian, isn't it? Now, to be retrenched is never pleasant. Bill certainly wasn't rejoicing. That is not why the colleague thought he was handling it differently. But he was a Christian man who rested in a sovereign God who he knew was ultimately in control of all things. And his colleagues had noticed. As one writer says, wherever there are people whose hearts are not fretful or anxious or in a frenzy, the world sits up and takes notice. May it be that your colleagues sit up and take notice. Notice that the pressures of work, they're hard and they're difficult and burdensome, but they don't overwhelm you. Because there is a good sovereign God in whom you rest, and so you can also sleep. Why don't I close in prayer for us, and then I'll hand back to Sharon. Father God, we thank you that it is good news that you're in control of all things and not us. And yet we confess we are so prone to forget. I am so prone to forget. We thank you that in your kindness you gently remind us and you daily remind us with our need for sleep. Father, we do pray that this great truth, that you're sovereignly in control of all things, might overwhelm and shape the way we live and work, that it might be a powerful witness and testimony to a world that is restless and anxious, ultimately so that you get the glory. Amen.